Carter. I'm with the Space Coast Transportation Planning Organization. I'm the operations manager and the project manager for this study, the Wickham Road Operational Analysis. I also like to take a moment to introduce our study team, our consulting firm. This is Travis Hills. He's the project manager for Hiddleston and Associates. Where'd everybody go? They all sat down and did. If you'd like to introduce yourself just briefly.
By legal WPM.
And Stephen Bostel is also from the Space Coast TPO. Back at the check-in sign-in desk, we have Sarah Crom and Georgiana Gillette. We have a new member who started, there's Kim Smith. She is our bicycle pedestrian safety coordinator. A couple of rows in front of her, we have Abby Rex, who started yesterday. She is our public involvement officer. And next to her, we have our distinguished Bob Comm. He is our executive director. Again, welcome. Thank you for all taking your time to come to our meeting tonight and learn about what we're doing on Wickham Road. First of all, I just want to go over briefly what the Space Coast TPO is, who we are, and how did we get to this point, why are we studying Wickham Road, what your role is as the public and what we're looking for you to do, and what kind of feedback we're looking for. Then Travis will get up and give the specifics, the presentation for the Wickham Road Operational Analysis and the existing conditions that we've gathered to date, and go over that information. And then we're going to break after that, and we will be available for till 7:30 to answer any questions. We will not have an answer question session after the presentation, then you can come up and talk to us one-on-one. If you don't like that, there's different methods. You can use our website. Please fill out the feedback form, and on the back of it, if you want to write your comment, you can do that also. So just real briefly, has anybody ever heard of the Space Coast TPO? Anyone? Some of you, which is good. Very, very generic. I'm not going to go into the details because you're here to listen about Wickham Road, not the Space Coast TPO. But it is an organization that is comprised of 19 elected officials. They represent the cities through Brevard County. We also have a representative from Port Canaveral. They are responsible for coordinating transportation projects and prioritizing them. Those that use federal and state funds. That's the most important point. Your local roads that are in your neighborhood, the TPO is not responsible for working on those roads. That's left up to the city or Brevard County. One of the notes to make, Wickham Road is through the city of Melbourne and other jurisdictions, but it is maintained by Brevard County. So we have multiple jurisdictions involved. So how did we get here? A couple of years ago, actually it started many, many years ago, trying to get crash data in a system that we could use. In 2014, that system was completed and we had done a county-wide analysis of where crashes were occurring throughout Brevard County. What that did for us was identify where they were occurring. So we could look at the corridors where we were having high crashes of both frequency and severity. So last year, we completed 10 safety audits on 10 different corridors throughout the county. We did 5 of them that focused just on bicycle pedestrian safety crashes, and then the other 5 were high crash corridors road safety audits. And luckily or unluckily, Wickham Road was one of those 5 corridors. So as a follow-up, when we did those studies, that identified the issues. Now we have to find out, well, what are the solutions to solve those issues? That's what we're here tonight to talk about. So what are we studying? We're looking at our signalized intersections. What can be done to coordinate them better, maybe? Do we have all of our pedestrian features that we are needing? Bicycle facilities at the intersections? Traffic operations such as additional turn lanes may be needed. Because Wickham Road is a highly traveled corridor. There's over 30,000 vehicles per day on average utilizing it. And then along the corridor itself, do we have pedestrian facilities that are consistent? Do we have bicycle facilities? And we also have to remember our transit users. Every transit user is also a bicyclist or a pedestrian at some point in their route to get to that bus stop. So we need to make sure that this facility accommodates those needs. I just want to point out, I know some of you want to come, you want to make your issue known, and that you want that bulldozer out there to fix it. I wish it was that simple. As you can see, we started this years ago. We're in the middle of it in a way, because once we identify our issues and the solutions, we're going to have to design them. And if the design requires right away, that adds an additional couple of years sometimes, additional money, and then we get to construct it. So the goal is to look at some simple solutions, maybe that can be done in the short term, in the next few years, and then the longer term, what we ultimately want this corridor to look like and function that meets your needs. These are users, that's why you're here. So what is your role? That's why you're here. Give us your feedback. We're looking for you to tell us where did we miss some issues, or specifically some issues. Travis will go over the boards in the back, and you can actually write on one of the areas. If you have a specific spot, I have an issue crossing the road here. I feel unsafe. It's dark at night. I can't get across the road safely. Please let us know. All of your comments will be important, because one of the things why we're studying Wickham Road first is because a citizen like you, and it only took one, came to a public meeting last year and stressed a very significant concern at Aurora and Wickham Road. We knew there were issues there. We're like, the citizens are coming to us. Let's address this. We only have so much money, but we knew this was a high priority for our citizens, so we picked this one first. So your voice does count. So don't think that what you're selling tonight isn't going to be heard. So I'm going to have Travis take over now, and he'll go over the details of the study. And like I said, afterwards, we will be available for any one-on-one questions. And thank you again for your time and coming to our meeting. Thank you.
All right. Make sure this works here. Can everybody hear me all right in the back? Yep.
Can we close that door?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's the easiest question I get all night. I'll take it. All right. So can everybody hear me in the back? All right. Once again, I'm Travis Hills. I'm with Kittleson Associates. I'm the PM on the Wickham Road Operational Analysis. Laura gave a great intro on kind of why we're here, what we're going to be doing. I'm going to go through the existing conditions analysis, some of the things we've been looking at. No, unfortunately, we do not have solutions yet. This is part of the process. So hopefully we'll go through the existing conditions, the issues, deficiencies that we've been seeing, and hopefully we'll be able to get together after my presentation in the back and talk a little bit more about that. And then obviously, hopefully you all provide input on what we should be looking for. We have some ideas already, but you all are the ones that live along this corridor, right? I live, unfortunately, an hour north in Daytona Beach, so I'm very familiar with this area, but I do not live here. So any input, anything that you all want to look at, want to be studied, we definitely want to know that. So the agenda for the presentation, we'll discuss the project background, give a little bit of an overview on where we're at. We'll discuss that existing conditions analysis, get into the issues and opportunities, and for those that went through the back and looked at some of the boards, a lot of that is what I'm going to be talking about here in a little bit more detail. And then we'll talk through next steps and when we're hopefully going to be getting together again and reaching out to you all. So a little bit on the project background. So study corridor, everybody's pretty familiar. You all walked around the boards, you saw where we were looking, but we're looking at O'Galley up to Lake Washington. A little bit about the study corridor. We've put some of the land uses on there that people are probably pretty familiar with. So we have the Aldi that was just recently constructed, CVS and McDonald's up near Northgate Street. We have the Publix up at Lake Washington, Bank of America, Wells Fargo. So just get a little bit of an idea about kind of where we're looking and some of the key land uses along the corridor. We do have 4 signals along this corridor: O'Galley, Aurora, Northgate Plaza, and then Lake Washington. Our AADTs are somewhere between 32,000 and 35,000 along the corridor. You can see the speed limits there, they do vary. So for most of the corridor, we do have a 35-mile-an-hour posted speed limit, but once we get north of around Northgate, or I think it's Dusa Drive, I think is where we have our 40-mile-an-hour posted speed limit to the north.
What are AADTs?
Oh, sorry, I apologize. That is traffic volume that's out on the corridor. Sorry. If I say an acronym, as Bob likes to say, feel free to let me know and I will explain it. I sometimes get very engineering, so hopefully I won't do that too much. Yeah, AADTs are traffic volumes along the corridor, so that's how many cars are out there on a daily basis. So where are we at in the overall project schedule? So you should have a miniature version of this on the back of your 2-page handout. We are here, so that is the public workshop. We had a little bit later, early first week of May. What we'll do is talk a little bit about more of the schedule, but pretty much in a nutshell, we've accomplished everything before this in terms of the existing conditions analysis, which is what I'll be going through next. So getting into right-of-way and typical sections. So what we like to do as part of this analysis is figure out where our right-of-way is and where the adjacent parcels, houses, businesses are along the corridor to see how much room we have out on the roadway for possible alternatives in the future. What we're seeing out there is we're somewhere between 75 to about 100 feet, depending on where we're at along the corridor. The general cross-section, as most of us know in this room, it's a 5-lane with a 2-way left turn lane. what we typically see with these corridors is you have a lot of conflict points. And so if anyone looked at the crash map back there, you saw that we have a lot of dots on that map. A lot of dots are because of that center two-way left turn lane for the most part. We do have 12-foot lanes out there, and we do have intermittent sidewalk. So for those who bikes or walks along this corridor, pretty much that's great. That's awesome. I mean, we're hopefully going to fix a lot of the issues that are out there. So I'm sorry that you have to walk in the conditions that there are, but we do have intermittent sidewalks. We don't have any bike lanes for those that bike. They're either biking in the road or on the sidewalk. What we're seeing is we do have sidewalks on both sides of the road from O'Galley to just about Trimble Road. And then once you get north of that, you pretty much lose your sidewalk on your west side. There's little patches here and there where some development has come in, but for the most part, you don't have sidewalk on that west side of the road. And a little bit on the pedestrian facilities, we went out and the Kittleson team, along with representatives from the Space Coast TPO, we went out and walked this corridor. We went out and walked it from O'Galley all the way up to Lake Washington and took a lot of pictures of the issues that we were seeing. And so who's familiar with some of the things that I'm showing up here? Pretty much a lot of people, right? So we do have some locations where we have pretty decent pedestrian facilities, right? That bottom left-hand corner, you're just north of O'Galley on the west side of the road. You have a sidewalk out there, it's about 5 feet wide, you're offset from the roadway. But then you get a little bit north of that, and you have that cow path where people are using that area to walk instead of having an adequate sidewalk out there. We do have some crossing facilities. So the upper right corner is O'Galley Boulevard. We do have crosswalks out there. They are a little bit faded, but they are present. And then the upper left corner, who's ever walked across the Trimble Road mid-block crossing? Is it pretty easy to cross there? Probably not, right? I've tried to walk out there. The only way that I was able to get across was because we were out there when a crossing guard was. So when you have the type of traffic volumes that you have out there on Wickham Road, it is very difficult to cross. And how many times has a vehicle stopped for you when you've been standing at Trimble Road?
Never.
Probably never, right? So there are some issues there, and there are some things that we're going to be looking at to hopefully help that situation. And we also took a look at the existing transit network as well. And when we went out, we looked at all the bus stops that were along the corridor. We mapped them. We've also been working with Lance Parker and Jim Leisenfeld over at Space Coast Area Transit to really get into what the needs are from a transit perspective along this corridor. There was a recent ADA study that was completed a few years back, and all of those recommendations are going to be incorporated into this study, especially if we go out here and look at adding sidewalks. So what we see here is, let me make sure I got the right thing here. We see all of our transit stops north of Aurora or on the west side of the road. Where do we have our sidewalk gap? On the west side of the road where those transit stops are, right? So what we're seeing direct correlations here with where we have transit stops and where we don't have pedestrian facilities. And so we're going to try and merge that together and bring that together as part of our alternatives analysis. A little bit on drainage and utilities. This is a big deal, and I'll go into a little bit more about why we don't have pedestrian facilities out there, but you can see for yourself. On that west side of the road, which is where a lot of these pictures were taken, we have really big transmission lines that are out there on the west side that are just off the side of the road. We also have kind of that cow path area, and you have a lot of drainage ditches. So has anyone walked in any of these drainage ditches on the west side of the road? I unfortunately had to do that as well. That was how these pictures got taken. So it's a very unpleasant way to walk, right? I mean, you're either in the ditch or you're standing right next to the side of the road. And so that's something that we're going to be taking a look at and seeing how we can work around both the drainage and utility issues that we have out there to possibly put in sidewalks on the west side of the road. So a little bit about existing traffic characteristics. And we took a look, we took traffic counts, and we analyzed 8 intersections along the corridor. Don't worry, I'm not going to go into all the details here. You can come up and ask me after, and I will be happy to explain them to you. But in a nutshell, we looked at the 4 major signalized intersections along the corridor, and we also took a look at some two-way stop controlled intersections or unsignalized intersections along the corridor. Trimble Road being one of those. We wanted to see what those traffic volumes were because there is that mid-block crossing there, and what are we going to be able to do to both facilitate autos and pedestrians at that intersection. And then when you get up into just north of the Northgate Plaza, you have the signal there. We know that there's a lot of congestion through there. You have the McDonald's driveway that produces a lot of traffic, and then Northgate Street. And possibly looking at those three areas and trying to see what we can do to help facilitate both pedestrians, bicyclists, and vehicles in that location. And then we also know that Lansing Street is a hot topic with a lot of folks. I know that that's the only outlet for the subdivision over to the east. We have a local resident here who's on the TPO staff that lives in that neighborhood, and there has been a signal warrant study that's been completed by the county there, and so we're going to try and roll those recommendations in and see what we can do at that intersection to both benefit safety, pedestrians, bicyclists, and vehicles at that intersection. So a little bit on the operational evaluation. So what we did is we took all those traffic volumes and we performed an operational analysis on them. Really, the level of service is A through F. With F, what does F stand for? Failing, right?
Yeah.
Probably not good. It's not good. And then A being your best. And so what we wanted to do was just show that from an intersection perspective, for all the two-way stop controls, we were generally in kind of that B to C level of service. So we were adequately okay. We did have some intersections like Washington and Oak Alley where we were having some issues. And so we're going to be going out and taking a look operationally at those intersections to see what we can do to help there. Along the segments, what you'll see is the orange lines are you're in that D to E range. So you're really not, you're kind of on the cusp of failing there. And you're really not doing great today. We do have the section, and I was talking to a few folks back there about the section from Aurora up to the Northgate Street and that signal, those two signals there and how they interact and how if you're not getting good signal timing through there, you could hit a green light at one of those intersections and hit a red at the other and really get bogged down through that area. So that's why we were seeing that level of service F. And so these are just things that are going to go into our operational and our vehicular analysis to try and see what we can do to help the corridor on that front as well. And so a little bit on crashes. So for the folks that were in the back, you saw the couple maps that I'm going to show next. But the overall raw numbers, because we didn't have all those up there, we had 667 crashes over our 5-year crash history from 2011 to 2015. That's quite a bit of crashes when you're taking a look at such a short corridor. What we were seeing though is that in terms of crash severity, the crash severities weren't that high in terms of number of percentages. Obviously, we don't want to see fatal crashes anywhere, whether it's vehicular, pedestrian, or bicyclist. We're trying to drop those down to 0. But when we're seeing 5 or 1% of our crashes are fatal and only 28% are injury, what we're seeing is a lot of rear end crashes, what you'll see over here on the right. A lot of rear end crashes, and what does that correlate to? It correlates to congestion, right? So we have a lot of cars out on the road, typically slower speeds. At slower speeds, you typically get crashes that are less severe. So in a good way, we're not seeing a lot of fatal and injury crashes in terms of percentages, which is good. But there is still some work to be done. What can we do to lower those rear ends down? Can we get traffic to flow a little bit better so we can reduce those crashes? Another couple interesting things that we saw was that 80% of the crashes occurred during the weekday. So it's really a commuter corridor. It's a corridor where people are using it to go to and from work when you're seeing those types of numbers. And then really to get more specific, it's that PM peak hour. So I would probably think, and you all may agree with me, that the PM peak hour from about 3 to 6, 4 to 7 is probably the heaviest traffic that you'll see out there, right? And you'll see it pretty heavy in the morning, but the PM is definitely where we're seeing a lot more traffic. So you'll see that correlates with the crashes. And then what a lot of people in here are interested in is what are those ped and bike crashes, right? So we had 21 bicycle crashes and 6 pedestrian crashes. The 21 bicycle crashes, when we took a look at those, over half of those were bicyclists who were in the roadway who got struck by either a turning vehicle coming onto Wickham Road or got struck by a vehicle on Wickham Road. And that's a relatively high number. That's something that we're going to be taking a look at. And that really tips us off for what type of pedestrian and bicycle, or what bicycle facilities do we have out there. We don't have anything, right? So there's no shoulder, there's no bike lanes, and you get a lot of people that are riding in the road. And we went out on our field review. We saw 5 to 6 people just in the couple hours that we were out there that were riding in the road. Someone that I saw almost got clipped by a pickup truck that didn't give them enough room. And so these are things that are issues that need to be addressed and that we're hoping to get at as part of this study. So a little bit more on that crash history. So these maps are in the back. I'm not going to go over every detail here, but we did want to highlight a few areas. And going from south to north, we did notice that Pine Hill up to Orange Manor Drive was one of those high crash locations where we did have a good proportion of left turn crashes. And so what we're seeing is a lot of those left turn crashes are due to that 5-lane cross section that we have out there. I know a couple people were talking about Aurora Road and Lake Washington Road, and those are two intersections that we're going to be taking a close look at in terms of crashes and operational analysis, because we're seeing a pretty high relative percentage of left turn crashes there. And so when you go up to that intersection, you do have left turn lanes, but it's what we call the permissive left turn phase, where you just have the green ball, right? And so you do have the arrow phase where you can go and not have to worry about a conflict. But what we're seeing here is we have a lot of people that are using that permissive phase and getting into accidents as well. And so we want to take a look at that and see what we can do to help that situation. And then a little bit on the pedestrian and bicycle side. So these were just two areas that we wanted to focus on. All of the crashes are located on the back board, and this was just one of the locations at O'Galley Boulevard. We had some folks that got hit when they were crossing the intersection. We had some bicyclists that were in the road that got hit. We also saw a pedestrian fatality when they were trying to cross Wickham just north of the intersection. And so we take a look at that. Yes?
Excuse me, what is the length of time on both lights? When I press the button at Lake Washington and Wickham to cross, what is the length of time that I have to get across the street? Because I can't see the little body that says walk.
Yeah, correct. So it should be 3.5 feet per second times whatever the distance is of the crosswalk. And I could get that number for you and let you know.
I actually crossed that today twice with my bike.
Yep.
I never saw the green walkman. Never saw him.
Okay. And those are good things to bring up, and those something that, those are kind of those short-term maintenance issues that if you write those down on the comment card, we can take those back to the shop and get those fixed almost immediately. So. And then a little bit further north, from Pine Hill Drive to just north of Aurora, this was where we saw our greatest concentration of pedestrian and bicycle crashes. And a lot of those were either folks that were trying to cross the road who got hit, or bicyclists that were in the roadway that got struck. And so what we'll do is to wrap this up and to kind of summarize everything, what we did was we took a look at all this different analyses, and we came up with two maps that had all the issues and opportunities, both from a multimodal side and a vehicular side. And so from the multimodal side, and really these are what we're hoping you all will comment on. So when you go back and you get to digest this information, come back and talk with us here in a little bit, write down any comments and let us know if we're hitting the mark, if we're missing something, because this is the area that's going to set us up for our future alternatives analysis. But what we're seeing is we're seeing those pedestrian facility gaps. And so on that west side of the road, pretty much from Trimble north, there are, like I said, there are a few sidewalk areas that are out there today, but for the most part, you don't have that sidewalk on the west side. There is a little piece east from Kingston up to Aurora. It's right there in front of the auto shop, and then there's the strip mall there. The sidewalk just kind of ends right in the middle of the parking lot for the strip mall, and then there's really not a lot of area there to get up to the signal where you have any adequate pedestrian facilities. And then what we have is we have the whole corridor highlighted for bicycle facility enhancements. There's nothing out there today. We are seeing a need both from the observations of people out there bike riding and the crash history. So that's something that we're definitely going to be taking a look at. And then we have pedestrian mobility emphasis intersections, and these are for different reasons. So what we have is pretty much every major intersection or every intersection that we're taking a look at is a pedestrian mobility emphasis intersection. One of those reasons may be incomplete pedestrian facilities. So if anyone's walked at the Aurora or Lake Washington intersections, you'll notice there aren't crosswalks at every leg, right? There's not landing pads at every leg. Well, we're going to be looking at how can we fit those in, how can we get those PED facilities in, and then on top of that, connect it to the rest of the network. If we went out tomorrow and built a concrete pad with 4 crosswalks at Lake Washington, but no sidewalks on the west side, what good is that going to do? People are going to cross the road and they're still going to walk into a ditch, right? So we're going to try and tie all these together to make sure that we have complete pedestrian facilities and bicycle facilities along the whole corridor. And then we have those transit stop enhancements. Yes?
At any point in time, is eminent domain going to take effect here?
That's a question that we do not have an answer to yet, where we haven't gotten into the alternatives analysis yet. So what we'll do is we've got to figure out what the scale of our alternatives are going to be and if any right-of-way is going to need to be taken. So we just don't have the answer at this time. But what we're also going to be looking at is those transit stop enhancements. And going back with that ADA report, making sure that we're coordinating with Space Coast Area Transit, Lance, Jim, to make sure that those things are being incorporated into our ped bike facilities. And then on the vehicular utility and drainage issues and opportunities. So we wanted to summarize this as well because these directly relate to what we're going to be doing on the multimodal side. We do have those utility conflicts along the west side of the road, pretty much from Trimble all the way up to Lake Washington. So what you'll see here, that blue line that's shaded there, directly correlates with where our missing pedestrian facilities are. So what we're seeing is that if it was an easy fix, it would have been done already, right? So we do have utility issues. We have quite a few drainage issues on that west side as well, where we do have those swales. Fortunately, a lot of this corridor is piped already. There's underground pipe that transfers water. So that will hopefully go to our advantage when we start looking at cross sections. Another thing that we looked at was peak hour queuing. And so all the yellow up here, the ones on the left are southbound, the ones on the right are northbound, and these are all a little bit easier to read on the back maps. But we did see a lot of queuing out there, a lot of congestion. So what we're seeing is northbound from O'Galley all the way up to Aurora. I witnessed this personally. It was backed up bumper to bumper, and people weren't going anywhere. That's something that we're going to have to take a look at and address. And then going in the southbound direction, just north of O'Galley. So really O'Galley is one of those kind of pinch points. It's one of those critical points where we're seeing a lot of that congestion. We also noticed in our analysis that Lake Washington, trying to turn left, make a westbound left to go south, that also backs up as well. And so we've seen that, and we'll be looking to address that. The left turn and angle crash emphasis areas. So these are along the middle of the corridor where we saw a high number of left turn or angle crashes. And this is directly due to that two-way left turn lane. So what we're going to be looking at is possible alternatives to hopefully reduce those conflict points in those areas and possibly restrict some turning movements, make it available so that we can get people out safely onto Wickham Road and reduce those crashes. And then all the little water icons are all everywhere where we had drainage issues or drainage facilities that may be impacting something that we do in the future. So a little bit on next steps, and then you won't have to listen to me talk anymore up here. So an upcoming task, we're going to be looking at our future conditions assessment. And this is going to be getting into, we're going to project, we're going to get a growth rate for the corridor, apply that to our traffic volumes, project those out to see what the traffic is going to be like in 40 years to make sure that we accommodate that along the corridor. We're also going to be getting in and doing that alternatives analysis to get in and see what pedestrian and bicycle facilities we can do. We're going to do a typical section analysis and see how much room do we have out there and what facilities can we add. And then we're also going to go in and look at those specific intersections and see what can we do from a ped bike mobility standpoint and an operational standpoint. And what we're going to do is hopefully we'll come to you all sometime in the fall. Yes.
When you did your analysis on bike riders, at what time of the day did that start?
So for this corridor, we took intersection turning movement counts, which counted the bicyclists at the intersection. We didn't count any along the corridor, but we did observe bicyclists that were out there, so we know that there is a need. And what we'll do is hopefully in the fall will be when our next public meeting is. And we'll come back to you all with some alternatives, some cross-section alternatives, the alternatives that enhance ped bike mobility, the alternatives that enhance vehicular safety and vehicular operations. And we'll hopefully present that and get some ideas on what we want to do kind of moving forward for this corridor. So I think that was it. We'll leave this up here for contact information. I'll stop talking. My voice is starting to hurt a little bit. So what we'll do is anyone that has questions, feel free. The study team is going to stand in the back at the boards. Now that y'all have a better understanding of kind of what we're trying to do here, come back, feel free, ask us questions, and we'll talk for a little bit. We'll be around until 7:30.
I just asked, do you